In our last lesson, we looked at an excerpt from Ravel's Miroir to understand some key elements of his harmonic style. In this lesson, we'll do the same, but with Debussy's Des Pas sur la Neige. We said that a composer had a distinctive harmonic style. This means that they limit their choices within a coherent world of sound. A composer who uses all 12 notes of the chromatic scale equally all the time can't sound harmonically distinctive. This doesn't mean that very chromatic music is necessarily bad, but just that within the sound world of those 12 notes, there need to be differences of emphasis and in the rhythm at which the 12 notes circulate. If they all appear equally all the time, it's very difficult to create a sense of direction, or what amounts to the same thing, expectations, at least with respect to the harmony. So what's distinctive about Debussy's harmonic style? Let's look at this piece to see the answers to this question. Let's listen. This piece is built around a simple motive called X here, which appears repeatedly, almost like an ostinato. Most of the time, this motive is immediately repeated but a step higher, as in the above example. This is what starts the piece, and it seems to suggest the key of D minor. The accompaniment is alone in the first bar, repeated in the left hand over a D pedal. Then, the melody in the next 3 bars fills in all the other notes in the D natural minor scale. In measure 5, things start to develop. The ostinato stays as before, but now the harmony is richer. A new note is introduced, B natural. Debussy now adds the lower register, and the bass descends in parallel fifths from G to D. Parallel chords are a recurrent aspect of Debussy's style, although sometimes they're mitigated by the other parts which don't necessarily move in parallel at the same time. In general, they can be seen as a kind of orchestral doubling, a way to color a given line and to enrich its sonority. And when the bottom interval of parallel chords is a fifth, the sound is quite solid. That said, when we hear these parallel progressions, not all the chords are of equal weight. The last chord in particular is the real goal. In this case, it's highlighted by longer duration and a change of texture in measure 7. This creates the first important punctuation in the piece. Measures 8 to 11 become a little more intense as the ostinato motive, using the same pitches, now appears over more chromatic harmony. Measures 8, 9, and 10 all seem to end on a dominant 7th of F sharp, approached in each case by a conjunct bass line in the first half of the bar, and then a downward leap between the bottom 2 notes of this dominant 7th. But the expected resolution doesn't occur. Instead, in measure 11, we arrive at a G flat 7, and for the first time in the piece, the ostinato pauses, while the left hand moves melodically around the notes of D flat major, without a clear arrival in that key. Then the melody pauses on C, at the end of measure 13, and Debussy makes that C and the B flat of the upper harmony the common tones, leading us into a whole tone chord. Under that static whole tone chord, the bass refers to the ostinato motive but at a low register. The music pauses, creating a second punctuation point in measure 15. As before, this cadence is underlined by a short monophonic texture as the bass moves down chromatically through C, B, and B flat. Then in measure 60, the motive returns in its original register over G, A flat, and B flat. Measure 16 to 19 remind us of measure 1 to 4, but now the mode being used is G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E, F. The ostinato in each of these bars now takes place over the first 3 notes of the mode, G, A flat, and B flat. This is not a conventional church mode, but the effect is the same. It limits the pitches in this phrase, acting here like a modulation with a specific character. Measure 19 introduced one new note, A. In measure 20-21, echo measure 5 to 6, but instead of finishing the parallel chord descent on a D minor chord, now it goes to a D flat dominant 7th chord. The B natural in measure 20 is reinterpreted enharmonically in measure 21 as a C flat, and a short melodic phrase develops in that key. For the first time, the ostinato motive stays on EF instead of returning to DE each time. As the right-hand melody develops, reaching its peak in measure 23 on the high A flat, the bass rises chromatically in parallel dominant 7th chords from D flat to E. Another short monophonic lightening of the texture follows, recalling the one in measure 7. Then the ostinato motive returns to its original form, alternating between DE and EF in measure 26 to 28. The bass falls chromatically from G to F in measure 26-27, and the lower D minor chord gives the phrase a bit of stability in measure 27. The chord at the start of measure 27, F, G sharp, and C, now becomes F, A flat, and C in measure 28. This chord rises under the second half of the ostinato motive to A flat and C flat. Now Debussy recalls and further develops the melodic line from measure 21 to 24. As in measure 12 to 13, the ostinato completely disappears. The left hand here has parallel 6th chords in G flat major until measure 31, where you arrive at the dominant of G flat major. This is also the highest point in the melodic line up to here. Then, in measure 32-33, the ostinato returns, but now in the high register and doubled in octaves. In fact, this is the registral peak of the whole piece. The harmonic vocabulary of these 2 bars is clearly D minor. Finally, after pausing momentarily on a G7 chord, the subdominant of D minor, Debussy simply arpeggios the left hand all the way down, on the root and the 5th of that chord, to the lowest register in the piece, where a quiet, widely spaced D minor chord marks the final cadence. So what can we deduce about Debussy's style from all of this? Debussy's harmony is based on thirds, like Ravel's. It may be arranged as triads, 7 chords, etc., but chords built on thirds are everywhere in evidence. His harmonic vocabulary is basically diatonic, in the sense that non-chromatic scales of pitches are the norm. But these are not limited to major minor. He also uses modes to vary the colors. Thus, the leading tone is much less important than in more traditional tonal harmony. Debussy does not use it for a strong sense of direction. Sometimes he also uses whole tone passages, which also weaken the sense of direction. There are varying degrees of contrast between phrases, both harmonically and motivically. The various harmonic regions are connected by smooth voice leading, conjunct motion, or common tones. Parallel chords are a way to enrich the texture. When they're used alone, the last chord is the one that determines the direction. A lot of the development in the piece is registral and textural, so high points and endings are set off by these changes.